Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Fluency podcast. It is great to have you with me today. And before we get started, if you are listening to this on YouTube, then check out the description for your free book, The 5-Step Plan for English Fluency. And you can also do that if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or whichever platform you are using. Now, today we're going to talk about shopping local or local shopping. And this just means buying things from businesses which are native to your area. So an example of this is buying shoes from a local shoe shop, one that is based in the city where you live, versus buying shoes online from Amazon. So there's a big difference here, and I'm going to talk about how this trend has changed over the years. I'm going to talk about some stories from my childhood too, which is going to be great listening practice for you. And then I'm just going to give some thoughts on what I'm trying to do and why I think this is important. Now, in episode 14, which you can watch or listen to, which I'll put a link in the description, we talked about buying online and how it's so easy these days to fall into the habit of just buying something online and getting everything online because of convenience. And this trend rocketed last year when coronavirus happened and shops closed down, and the only way you could buy stuff was online. And I think people have fallen into the habit of doing this now, and it's just become a norm. This was a trend that was happening anyway, but it really just took off last year due to what happened. I want to give you 3 statistics when it comes to buying local, and I think these are really interesting. Okay, so the first one is this. Small businesses of 500 or fewer employees make up over 99% of US employer firms. So small businesses of 500 or fewer employees, or you can call them workers, make up over 99% of US employer firms. So the vast majority of businesses in the US are small businesses. Now, speaking of Amazon, here is a stat. In just 1 year, Amazon displaced 62,000 shops and 900,000 retail jobs. So Amazon displaced 62,000 shops and 900,000 retail jobs. And the last stat here is that the lockdowns caused over 100,000 of local small businesses to close permanently. So this has been a big trend as well, where a lot of small businesses had to close permanently due to the restrictions placed by local and big governments. So I think these 3 stats really highlight 2 things: the importance of buying local if you care about local businesses, but also just the trend that is happening at the moment, where online retailers are really taking over local businesses. And this has been happening for years now. And I think there are 2 ways to look at this when you're thinking about this and the implications. And the first one is to say, well, this is happening and it's very difficult to stop. This is a trend that is just going to accelerate, and it's going to be very difficult for that trend to stop. And you can think about things in the past where in the UK during the Industrial Revolution, and elsewhere too in France, the Luddites were a group of people who wanted to stop the machines coming in and taking over their jobs when it came to producing cotton and other materials. And you can see this all the time when a new type of industry comes in, like Uber, which is the car ride service, which has taken over traditional taxi cabs. And I've been in countries where there have been big protests, for example in France, from taxi drivers against companies such as Uber. But it's one of these things where you think, okay, is this a trend that's going to happen anyway? Is automation and online shopping and apps like Uber, are they just going to take over? Is that the trend that is going to happen and we can't do anything about it? And the second way to look at it is to think, well, what can I do? What do I think is best in these situations? And how can I, as a person, change these types of trends and behaviors? And personally, I think it is super important to buy local. And the stats that I shared before talk about this. And another stat here to highlight it is that if every US family spent just $10 extra locally instead of at a big box or national chain, so if they spent $10 on a local company versus a national company, over 9.3 billion would be directly returned to our local economies. So the benefit of buying local is it's going to benefit your local economy, because when you spend money in stores where the people who own the stores live in your local area, then that money is going to stay in the local area instead of going to people who work in different cities and to a company that is just going to take the money and make profit. Now, before I go on about some of my habits, I do want to talk about what it was like growing up in the UK and just how much more emphasis there was on buying local and just how much more of a way of life it was. So in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't anything like online shopping, but there was the emergence of big box stores, big companies, national companies that took over high streets. So if you went to the centre of Preston, the city or town where I grew up, then in the past there would have been all these local businesses. So people who were selling jewellery, food, clothes, all on the market or on the high street. But then that changed a lot, I think, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, where the big box stores, the big companies took over the high street and basically ran all the small businesses out of business. But what I remember growing up is something a little bit different, because I used to have a milk round where I used to deliver milk to people's houses. And in the past, the vast majority of people got their milk from the local milkman. And you couldn't really, or people didn't get milk from the supermarket. They had it delivered. And we also had other things delivered too, like the fish man would come over once a week in his van, and you would go out to the van and buy fish directly from the fishman. And then you would go to the local market or the butchers to get your meat. And all these companies, businesses were local businesses. So you wouldn't go to the supermarket to get the milk, the fish, and the meat. Instead, you would get these from 3 different places. And I used to have a milk round where I delivered the milk to people's doors. This job was brutal because I used to do it from 5 till 7 in the morning. I used to wake up at 4:30 and I did it in the winter. It was freezing cold. And then I went to school for the rest of the day. So that was one of the toughest jobs I've had. And I'm not sure the reason why it has changed so much. I think a big reason is convenience, where supermarkets started to stock everything that you needed, including clothes and toys and everything else. So you could go to one shop once a week and get everything that you need. And I also think that a lot of families now have their 2 parents working all the time. And obviously this is based on Western countries like the UK and the US, and my experience of that. But it'll be also interesting to know what it's like where you live too. So if there's a comment section below, please just give me your thoughts on this and how it has changed over the years. But I think the fact that 2 parents are now working full time, you don't really have the ability for one parent to be able to go and do all these things and to clean the house and then go to different shops and buy local. And going from supermarkets to having everything, now we're really starting the emergence of the online experience. And one of the good news stories for local businesses is that they can also get part of this online shopping experience. So, for example, I am trying to be more conscious and I'm trying to buy more things from local businesses. And one of the things I'm doing is I'm using a local farm now. And I've been doing this for a while actually to buy most of the meat, because the meat is high quality, they have good practices, and again it keeps the money within the local economy, within the local area. So that's one thing I'm trying to do more of and just make that more part of my life. And another thing that has really taken off, I think over the last 10 to 15 years in the US, is the farmers market. And this is where farmers will bring their produce, mainly vegetables and fruit, but also you get cheeses and meat and other products too. And they'll bring them to an area in different areas around town. And then you can go there and buy directly from the farmer. And this is another way for people to buy local. And it also brings about that community element too, because usually there is music, you see the same people there all the time, and you're engaging with farmers in a real way. And just to go back to the online shopping part, like I said, a lot of businesses now are setting themselves up so that you can buy online from them and have things delivered. So I know a few people who own businesses, including restaurants, in the area where I live, and they've started to do a lot more of that. This started really from the coronavirus lockdowns, where businesses, the only way they could survive was to deliver things. So this is happening with alcohol. It's happening with food. We know people who own a coffee company now who are delivering local coffee. People who have a tea company delivering local tea. So there are ways to marry, which means mix the ability or the convenience of buying online and also buying local. And just one of the differences that I have noticed in a big way, and this goes back to a podcast episode I did where I talked about getting around cities. And this is comparing mainly places like Spain to the US, where people are more reliant on the car in the US, and it's not walkable. It's very difficult to walk places in certain cities. And like I said, New York and places like Chicago, they are different. But when you go to small town America, it's quite difficult, or small cities, it's difficult to walk around town, which means that you can't just walk and go past local shops and browse shops. Instead, you get in your car, you go to shops in your car. And again, this is like the breakdown of local communities in a way. And it's difficult to then reinvest and to buy local when you don't feel part of that community. So I think the farmers market is a great thing that's happening in the US. But if we do have that detachment from local communities, the ability to buy online from local companies is a big step forward. So hopefully that has given you some good listening practice. Before you go, please, if you have enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend. And also go back and listen to it again if you want to improve your listening. If you're watching on YouTube, then there will be subtitles. So you can do things like watch it or listen to it once with subtitles and then listen to it without, and then revisit the episode, listen to it again in a week or so, and just see how much more you can understand the second time of listening. The repetition is really going to help you with that. And then also, if you really enjoyed the episode, I would be very grateful if you're on a podcast platform if you left a review. And instead of just going off and doing something else, why not have a look at the other episodes that I have made? I'll leave a link in the description on YouTube for the playlist. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, then just click on a different episode. All right, thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.